Hello.
Okay, daughter, you can no longer talk to me because I'm streaming. I'm in front of an audience.
A live studio audience.
You can sit next to me though if you want.
Let me.
You better be on fire. In which case, I'll probably figure out if there's a problem. Yeah, can we get that for you? All right.
I'm a little pixely, I think.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, well, you're eating up your bandwidth with those two broadcasts, so
Oh, yeah. That's true. You know what I can do? I wonder.
mute one camera.
Yeah, I'll mute this. Oh! I gotta mute this camera. There we go.
There's Cole in his action shot.
I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm so pixely. Okay, well,
Tell Steam to stop downloading every update known to man.
yeah, I
Here
should turn off Steam too. Uh, Hello!
you go, boss.
Bunch of
Oh,
folks
hi.
joining
Sorry.
us. I'm just turning off anything that might be patching right now, and I apologize for that. Get out of here. Get out of here.
I told Steam it can only have so many gigs a second, and it's made all the difference.
I also have like kind of an older camera, although it usually doesn't look quite this bad.
Well, you
Uh,
should ask your boss about a new camera.
I actually went to go buy one at Target, and they were way sold out, and they're very expensive right now for obvious reasons. Okay, let me just
I'm watching
work
us.
this, and then
So then people are going to watch the stream, and then there's going to be questions down this side. Sorry, I'm going to explain this to my daughter real quick, Cole,
you're
and
good.
then we'll be able to answer them.
Okay, I think. Whoops. Anything? Maybe. I don't know. I'll just be a little bit of a pixelated mess.
Okay.
All right. Hello, everybody. We are. This is the Leader Games. What are we calling this? The Design Chat, the Design Podcast,
Yeah, I suppose we could. Yeah, design cast. I don't know.
Design Cast, General
Uh,
AMA.
this is a little bit late. We should have had it like hour and a half ago when we were talking about Voidlich. Then
I
people
know
could have
we were getting
seen our
real.
internal processes. We were getting real. So we got to do that sometimes, though, right?
Yep, it's true.
So yeah, so we're going to talk about what we're working on, and we're going to talk about a few questions people have queued up for us, and we'll try to get to questions inside of the cast. I don't know if I don't know if any staff members watching and can help us pick out questions in case we miss them. I don't know if Gates is in the audience or not, but
Mhm.
that's okay. Should we probably retweet some of this or
Yeah, I was
something
kind of
like that?
waiting for the Gates tweet, but let me make
Yeah,
sure I don't
sure.
accidentally turn you
We'll
off while I
just
do this. Oh, there we go. All right, I'm gonna retweet this. There we go. And we also Gates sent us a list of questions to get us going. Where are those?
Gates just tweeted it
Oh,
19 seconds ago, so I'm just gonna retweet. There we go. All right. So, how is Oath going?
Oath is going really well. We are.
Mhm.
Let's see. I gave somebody on Twitter or no, on BGG asked me for a little development update, so I gave one to like the 5 people following that thread. So I guess I should give it more broadly. We are very close to design system lock. There were like a couple weird problem areas, but they mostly got figured out this last week.
Mhm.
And I'm finishing up the solo mode right now. Not well, we're getting ready to push it into development. So solo mode's done, or getting close to being done. All the different systems are working. We did a card audit. It's moving along. It should be done more or less on time. So it's really cooking. We're in the stage of development that we're in right now. Is I have these meetings once a week where I get the other two kind of primary developers who are helping me on the project. We get into a call together and we look at the spreads of all the different cards in Oath and we just go like 5 cards at a time. We're like, have
Mhm.
you ever seen this card used in an interesting way? Is this card like hitting the right narrative beat? Or is something off about it? Do we need to revise it? And we just kind of very slowly go through everything. but it's working really well. I'm pretty happy with the design. The testers have been great. I think it's been weird to do all the testing remote, but it has given me access to testers who would normally be playing with their home groups. So I feel very lucky
Hmm.
that I have the crew working on the game that is working on it. Yeah, that's how Oath's going.
Yeah,
How's
sure.
your stuff going?
That's that sounds great. I want to say I took a deep dive into the cards myself after you posted them. Like, I think like last Wednesday, last Thursday, the Dropbox with all the cards in it, and to little fanfare. So I felt bad and went and looked through them this weekend, and I'm pretty excited. I only got to like 5 pages because it's a lot of like there's a lot of like gushing, and then I'd stop and think about how I'd use the card, and then I went back to reading it. So I like the Rangers. I think this is the one that lets you make a follow up attack.
Hmm.
Is that right?
The second win does that.
Second one, yeah, I like that one a lot. That's cool. So
All right.
yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I've been cooking on I've been exploring a few branches of my own design space, um, and that is going more or less well. I'm kind of backed off on a couple things, but that's fine. I like the last 4 weeks, I've been reorganizing the company a little bit to deal with working from home, as I'm sure Cole's aware, as he is now kind of managing creative while we're at home, and then we'll decide about the permanency of that. And so that's been interesting for me because I've had a lot more hands-off time to work just on game design stuff, which has been really good for me, good for my soul. And then I've been working on Voidlich primarily, which has had maybe 5 or 6 playtests now.
Hmm.
And some with randos, some with studio. I say randos, but I know everybody that I'm testing with. Just people from the community. And yeah, that's been going pretty well. I think we're at a point now. Of course, because you were in
Yeah,
the meeting,
I just played it.
where there's kind of a basic structure to the
Hmm.
game, and now we have to go back and think about um, what sort of narrative elements we want to hit if it's going to be a campaign game, and we have to talk about those now because that will inform a lot of the design. Go back and inform a lot of this, or reinform a lot of the design. It isn't worth tweaking the game until after that's done, so that we know what sort of language we need to be expressive with. So,
Hmm. Yeah, and like it is,
yeah,
it is
so
now
that's
past the idea stage, right? It's a game that we can talk about.
yeah, and I think that's important to get to that point before
Hmm.
going back and working on the narrative. But
Totally.
yeah, I think now it's the time to do it. And we didn't really talk about it in the meeting, but I think like it would be good if there was maybe, I guess it doesn't need to be multiple preset campaigns, but it needs to be flexible enough that if you play it twice, then you feel like the story
It
isn't
feels
you're
different.
not
Hmm.
regenerating the same story over and over. Yeah. So that's where I am. I even since the meeting, I've had a lot of ideas and kind of wanted to open up like a PowerPoint or a whiteboard and start working on how to build each like kind of an automata of the state of your nation, and
Hmm.
how like before you can move to this box you have to shift someone else to this box, or whatever, however that looks, so that they're all pushing each other in a way that there isn't a weird state. It doesn't generate a weird state that then we didn't play test or something like
Right,
that, so
right,
that we
right.
can that we know all the possible states of the game, and we'll make sure we play test those, of course, with your design and my design and the number of combinations we present people. It is a challenge to
Hmm. That is
play
true.
test everything that could come up.
Yeah, no,
So,
it's in it like
uh,
with. I mean, one of the funny things about working on Oath is that like we just can't. There's just there's like as many games as grains of sand. You so quickly get in those high exponentials that you just have to pick strategic like strange games to play to get coverage in those areas. So
yeah,
I'm looking
and
at
that
the.
was
Oh,
that
go ahead.
was that was the hope. That was the hope of Voidlich, was that we would, like originally I pitched it as somewhere between Eclipse and Root as
Hmm.
far as the variability between the players. And so I was like, oh, that'd be a nice stable thing to test, and that'll be a vacation for all of us. But it's going to be a bit more complicated than
Yeah,
that.
well, we will see how big that gets. I just wanted to go through before we get into the Q&A. There are a couple
Yeah.
studio updates Gates wanted us to to touch on. So one thing,
Oh,
if you
sure.
if you want to hear more about Oath next Tuesday, I will be giving like a very full like the story of the past couple months, and I will be showing you guys a lot of stuff. I've been kind of holding it, mostly because I've been busy, but I just have a lot of fun things to show off. So that'll be next Tuesday, and then we'll be streaming an Oath game on Thursday. And then the Fort update, we are waiting on our first copies off the line. So it is in production right now. We're going to have copies off the
Mhm.
line, and I'm sure we'll take lots of pictures of those. We will be posting developer diaries and designer diaries on Wednesdays. Grants is already up. It's a great read. Encourage you all to check it out. And we've got live playthroughs in early June. And I think our web store pre-orders will go up in late June, early July, and it should ship in late July. So that's Fort stuff for those of you who are interested in Fort and where it's at. This a very short update on EU route. The underworld containers have arrived. Tracking is on BackerKit, so that they have arrived at our fulfillment center. It should probably take about a month to get all the orders out and to people. There's just such a high volume; it takes a bit. And we will be opening up after those go out. Yes, I want to make sure I say this right. After those go out, so shipping to the U.S. pre-order, the U.S. pre-orders will start once fulfillment wraps up in late June. So if you have a pre-order on Root Underworld, or sorry, you will be able to get those pre-orders as soon as EU is fulfilled. So soon, all the Root stuff is soon. Yeah,
And
sorry, a little scattered.
a few people in the EU have gotten theirs.
Yeah,
Because they're starting to leave that depot is starting to ship. So it's good. It's a good sign. I'm very happy that those are getting to people. Look at me being very happy.
also very happy.
It's been a bit of a slog getting those out. So all right, cool. Thanks for the update.
Yeah, thanks Gates for putting that together. I think it's useful. It's so funny. I feel like when we were smaller, it was very easy for all of us to be on top of everything all the time. And I have like not. I say this gladly. I haven't had to think about root shipping in a while, so it's nice that other folks are pushing it forward.
I've been
Uh,
very aware of it. So all right, cool. Well,
Sweet.
let's go get some questions.
Let's go to some questions. I'll shoot you one. Should we just pull from our little backlog?
Uh, I mean, there's plenty on the. Let's do one from the channel, and then we'll do one from the backlog, and then
Okay,
let's keep
cool.
going like that. Is that okay?
That sounds great.
All right. So, Northtown Actual, who occasionally helps me with playtesting and has done some graphic design for us, asks, "What, in your opinion, do you need ready before you begin a Kickstarter? Any resources or advice?"
I have a rule of thumb. I'm sure you've got lots of rules of thumb, Patrick. I have a very small rule of
Let's hear
thumb,
it.
which is it. In at least I think in general, it's taken us between 2 weeks and a month to build a Kickstarter. So you should have a copy of the game that you're able to send out to get like
Hmm.
comments and a review about a month before the Kickstarter launches, so that when the Kickstarter launches, you have a review or a something to share. I think that's
Hmm.
whenever I am like planning our future Kickstarters or Kickstarters for other projects, I always start with okay, a month before launch, we need to have a prototype I can give to a stranger and they can play it for, or a friend, and they can play it for review without having me there. And then you just kind of build everything backwards.
Even if that's not going to be the final product,
Right.
yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And my more pragmatic, not more pragmatic, my approach to it is that you have to know that it's gonna fund day one at this point in
Mm-hmm.
Kickstarter's life cycle, and obviously the heyday of like Alien Frontiers is a great game, but it also just got a lot of backing because it was a well made game that was early on Kickstarter, so
Mm-hmm.
it just did very well when the audience was still very small, and it did well without a lot of advertising, and like I said, I think it's a great game. It's in my collection. I play it, but it really got pushed along just by its novelty and not by its marketing. And now you have to have that marketing in place. And part of that marketing, of course, is then making sure a reviewer has a copy a month before it starts. Yeah. So That's where I see what you need. You need, and then after that, just the practical stuff. Have the
Yeah.
graphics, have the ad copy, blah blah blah.
Yeah, I mean, I
So,
think that like your comment about having the marketing place is so important because you have to come with a crowd. Like you can't find your crowd on Kickstarter in the same way that you might have been able to a while ago.
all right, Cole. Let's hear your first question off the list.
Okay. Um, hmm. I man, I feel like we get this question all the time, and so I'm not even gonna like count this as the first question I want to give you, but I do want you to answer it. Which is, how do you know when you should share a game to a publisher? Because you have a very good answer for this question.
Do I?
I feel like you do.
Um, yeah. So I think you should show a game. First of all, before you show a game to a publisher, make sure the game is going to fit into that publisher's approach to the market. And so, like for us, if you want to show us a game, and with Fort, we got away from it a little bit, but we also hunted for that game. We
Hmm.
didn't. That wasn't pitched to us. And so for us, it's going to be a 2,000 word rulebook, less guardrails, and some sort of novel. What do you call that? Emergent narrative from
Hmm.
the design of the game, from the particulars of the game. You're going to have an emergent narrative that you can tell after the game is over.
Right.
If you look at a Euro, you might just say, I built the wharf and I shipped a bunch of corn. If you look at Oath, it's going to be, oh, I got this guy with a donkey and he gets to let me look at cards in
Hmm.
another, or draw cards from another deck, and so on. So you want that. Um, is that my answer?
Yeah, no, I think that so like to me that there's like these two parts of that there are two answers, and so one of them is like how do you know when your game's ready to show to a publisher? You shouldn't your presence shouldn't be required, right? Like the game is ready when
Mm-hmm.
you could give it to somebody and they could play it without you. That's like the first. That's the part that I would give that answer. And then I think the
Yeah.
part that you offer is the more strategic advice, which is your game is ready when you can imagine it fitting into their catalog.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you sort of
And
keep,
some people,
yeah, go ahead.
you go ahead.
No, no,
And some people have a much broader catalog, right? Like
yeah.
if you look at and no, this is just their model. I'm not, again, I very no judgment. If you look at like Renegade, they are going to have a little bit wider approach to publishing, and there's that is they have done very well by that model. I sometimes I look how fast they grow and I go, dang it.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, if you're going to be pitching to someone a little bit more niche like us, yeah, make sure you're inside of that window.
Okay, I've got a real question for you, Patrick.
All right, go for it.
Which I'm going to skip around a little bit, but we can go back, so I'm not going in
By
order.
the way, you are crystal clear in the
I,
streaming,
I fixed it, so this is actually I'm cheating.
and then you're pixelated.
Uh,
You're pixelated in the Hangout.
yeah.
So that's
Well,
good
for
job.
those people watching this, I have a window over the window with the actual camera feed. I'm being a little sneaky. Patrick,
Okay.
if you ever get a chance to update the Crystal Caverns, beyond trimming the rules, beyond the obvious stuff, what are you going to change about the game? You've mentioned in the past hidden movement for the night, a further developed solo
Mm.
game. Are those things? Would you still want those things
Mm.
to happen?
Hmm. I mean, yes, my fantasy is that Vast does as well as Root. And then I, clearly then I'd have the development and design budget to
Hmm.
tackle the rest of the Root series. So for those of you who don't know, I had originally penciled out maybe 7 Vast titles when we were first discussing the game, and I have rules for one additional Vast already designed and some of that play tested, and I have a second one beyond that designed and not it hasn't been prototyped at all, except for like the Kyle Wolfel and I made the map just to see if it was like just do a proof of concept of the map before we committed to that to the insanity of that setting. And then beyond that I have more. So my goals for redesign would be to and like and that's in the question, right? Is I want to be able to make it so that it fits, even if I have to redesign Mysterious Manor a little bit. I want the two to talk better with each other,
Hmm.
and I want them to talk. I want the language of the game to be simpler, so that crosstalk is enabled. And I think teaching Crystal Caverns is a bit of a burden. When I designed it, I was still living in this world where I expected to play the same group every week,
Hmm.
and a lot of that's not true for a lot of gamers. And so being able to teach it, I think, is its portability is not as high as I. It's not high. I didn't anticipate having to need portability, and
Hmm.
at the time, so that needs to increase. Yeah, I would. I mean, ultimately, I would like a world where you could just drag in any hero in any setting, and have a game that works somewhat well. I mean, I would definitely advertise it as the standalones are where I did a lot of my testing, and so you're not going to see edge cases, but you're going to see strange situations arise if you mix things too much. So that'd be one thing. As far as like what I would change the Crystal Caverns proper, like rule wise, it was actually the thief would have hidden movement, not the knight would have hidden movement. And so I wanted to build kind of a, and in fact, I have written the rules for this. I just never prototyped it. Where there's kind of a Fury of Dracula style system where you're laying cards down. From the start of your turn, you reveal where your pawn is, and then you lay cards down to show where your character's been walking that turn.
Hmm.
And then the other players can, if they walk into one of those spaces where you've been, then they get a clue that maybe you've passed through or whatever. But they don't know where you are still until they
Hmm.
get to your position on the board, and then they can find you. Unfortunately, for that system, I don't think finding the thief is already so unrewarding
Hmm.
that actually having to hunt for the thief, I think you'd have to change the reward of finding the thief. Otherwise, players would just be like, fine, there's a guy running around somewhere in secret. If I run into him, great. If not, I'm not going to worry too much about it. So unfortunately, otherwise, I don't think I changed too much. I would like to strip the dragon's powers down to kind of a spider level of utility. Not quite that drastic, but maybe like half of what it has right now.
Hmm.
I think they could use a little rebalancing anyway. And then the goblins, I think, are fun, but are lost on a lot of people. So we'll see.
Hmm.
So that's what I would do if I could change it.
Yeah.
Oh no.
What?
I made Ryan hold his head with that answer.
Oh
So
no.
yeah.
I love the prospect of hidden movement games is I find intoxicating. And it's weird because I feel like I don't play very many of them, but I've just had so
Right.
many games of or not so many, but I've had enough games of Fury of Dracula or like Scotland Yard that were so vivid and amazing that I kind of like want that mechanism everywhere. Um,
And yeah, and my system built in like the cards that were like you walk south, so you have to
mhm.
establish what's north and west, which is pretty easy. So you put down a card that says you walk south, then you walk east, and then maybe you climb a wall, and maybe like Fury Dracula, the climb wall is noisy. So you
Mhm.
put that card face up. And so then
Sure.
the other players can be like, well, he moved twice and then he climbed a wall. So where does that put him? And so
Mhm.
like some of the cards would be noisier than others. Or maybe like when you're carrying a treasure, every third card has to be face up or something like that because the gold's falling on the floor or whatever. So
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah. Good question. Thank you. And again, I'd like to get back to it. I just with Root selling over 100,000 copies versus Fast is done about 20, 25, maybe. It's a hard sell developmentally to get working on. That being said, if there was some like I've talked to Cole and Nick about doing this. I think I've talked to you guys about doing this about just making the rest of the content and releasing
Mhm.
it for other people to try
Yeah.
without worrying about like having a finished product. So, and that would be just working for fun.
Mhm.
All right. Let's go back to the board. Um, any news about John Company?
Still working. The fall, maybe the fall. I don't know. It's tricky. I like don't. Drew, my brother and I have so Whirly Gig gets my Sundays and my Monday nights, and most of that time has been spent like doing business development work. So we're just slow. We're just kind of getting things set up. But the fall maybe it's cooking,
Cool.
but it cooks slow. Uh, any
All right.
word?
That was a short. Yeah,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, yeah.
Good. Well,
Okay, go
I
for it.
was gonna hit you back. Any words on TCC mobile digital version of a Vast game?
Oh, on so the we wrapped up development on the video game, and we're looking for, and by wrap up I mean we just stopped. We were with COVID on the horizon, and with where our budgets were going, with Root shipping later than we thought we were. Like our cash flow is. I hate to say that, like people are gonna think, oh no, it's in terrible shape. No, I made a very conservative move to make sure we were okay, and we're definitely fine right now. I think the stream has stopped.
Oh,
Can people on Slack comment at the stream? Okay, it's just caching a lot for me. Um, so yeah, we slowed down development. We were looking for a buyer for a little while, and then COVID, got kind of crazy, and so
mm,
like right now, like a lot of the people I was communicating with about that's dried up. So
yeah.
yeah, I should get out there and start stumping back on it. That being said, if someone's in the audience thinking, man, I would love to make the port of the board game, that's drop me an email because I would love to hear about your ideas for the port of the board game.
Hmm.
That's also another space we could explore new design without a lot of production work. All
Well,
right,
and we'll see too, right? When the direwolf route comes out, if it goes bananas, I'm sure there'll be appetite
yeah,
for.
then that'll be easier. Yeah. So, all right. Sorry, my family is awake. So I lost all the questions because I had to reload my stream, so my backlog on the chat is gone.
I've got one from Ryan. This is a good one. This is a fine question, which is where do we feel the board gaming hobby is going to be a year from now? It's been a lot of talk that the hobby board game hobby was reaching a peak. Are we in a kind of reset period?
I'll take that first.
Yeah, hit it.
So I think with me being trapped inside, I'm eventually going to design a solo game that I like. I think my problem with turning a multiplayer game into a solo game right now is, to me, and it maybe if you are 21, this isn't an issue, but me at 45, the issue for me with playing a solo game right now is I feel like when you talk about downtime being a problem for a game, like so if I give you a game where your turn is 10 minutes and my turn is 1 minute, obviously we have a criticism about downtime coming up. And
Hmm.
if you know there's a fine line there. Like some people complain if it's 2 minutes versus 1 minute. Some people complain if it's 3 minutes and 3 minutes. And so like definitely downtime is a very subjective experience. I don't mind a lot of downtime. I've discussed on this podcast, or not this podcast, this stream before, that I don't mind the 5 or 6 player game of Root because I like watching what's unfolding on the board, whereas you like 3 player game of Root because you like your involvement in the action.
Right.
And very valid. So my problem with solo games and I don't think this is discussed as much, but your uptime is so extreme in a solo game. I get
Hmm.
very fatigued, especially if the game has a lot of bookkeeping.
Yep.
I get very fatigued when I'm playing a solo game. I just want that moment of like, I am just going to stop and stare at the board and think about my strategy. Maybe I'll look at my phone. Maybe I'll talk to another player, and be social. And I don't get that with solo play as much. And I burned up a lot of my good solo time playtesting Vast. And so I own a lot of solo games now, and I keep thinking, oh, I like the solo dungeon crawl, and then I buy it and I don't play it because of the threat of that solo downtime. And maybe that's just me. Maybe I need to acknowledge, hey, I'm older and probably playing this game after 10 p.m.
No,
I
I
need to
think
just watch TV a little bit.
I think there is that. I mean, one of the things that I've tried to become a little more aware of over the past few years is thinking about that downtime and uptime and the importance of the relationship between those things in terms of like how the narrative gets composed for the game.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for instance, we did an experiment with Oath because we were a little worried at one point that Oath might have too much downtime. It has less than Root though, so like I'm no longer worried about it. But at one point, we did an experiment where we changed Oath so that it was single action impulse. You took one action, someone else took an action. Basically, destroyed the game's downtime. It made this so the game move very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
However, it had this problem where it was like telling a story where you were just like saying one word at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So you were unable as a player to like compose a sentence of
Mm-hmm.
action. And so like I kind of like couldn't remember what had even happened in the game. And I actually
Mm-hmm.
think this is why a lot of Euros, even Euros that are really thematically driven, don't imprint very well is because you're taking all these micro actions and you have no time to like chunk the actions you're doing into like a paragraph or you have no time to like rest and think about what's actually happening. So I when you were talking, I was reminded of High Frontier, which I love playing with 5 people,
Hmm.
because even though the turns are fast in High Frontier, with 5 players, there's enough negative space that I can like plan and get ready to do what I'm doing, and then I'll be like, well, I'm gonna take a water tank because I like need to plan some more. But I actually want that negative space, and when I play High Frontier with like 2 or 3, it's exhausting because it moves too
Yeah, because you're always
fast.
doing math,
Yeah,
right? Yeah. You're always doing math. My problem with High Frontier with 5 is that you get that one player who wants to auction every time. And like, so everyone else takes a water tank, which is just take a
yeah,
water tank. That's as
right.
complicated as your turn is. And then they're like, oh, now I'm going to start this auction and figure out what I'm going to sell off. And I'm like, oh, come on. I just want to fly my ship around the universe. Yeah. And so and then also just with COVID-19, we don't know how that's going to impact society, but obviously solo has a lot of appeal right now
Hmm.
because it is one thing I can do to game right now and be in an analog space because as much as I appreciate what TTS has enabled me to do with my career, boy, do I miss just pushing pieces around cardboard right now.
Yeah.
And my wife and I, we just had a baby, and you did too. And you guys are still gaming, but we just aren't gaming as much as we used to. So
We've gone down. We've gone down a little bit. I mean, Katie and I used to play like we would play Antiquity on a weeknight before kids. I mean, we would really go hard. And it is
sure,
not. It has really gone down. We've still been playing a little bit of Arkham. It's been a bit since we've played some of the card game. We've been playing Final Fantasy a lot actually, which is
nice.
strange. But it just happened. It was like I impulse bought a copy of FF12, which I had missed because it's in a period when I wasn't playing any video games. And the game is 50% garbage and 50% wonderful, and so it's been our evening fare.
Well, that's your downtime, right? The garbage.
Yeah, the garbage part. It has such a complex story and world building that the characters they have to pack a lot in their dialogue. So you're like, what is even happening in this game constantly?
So this is an interesting pushback about downtime. If I may move into another topic, a little bit
Go
different
ahead.
topic for me was that Voidlich. One of the reactions the audience has had is because the actions are so atomic. Um, like some people have reported, I feel a lot of tension. Like I'm always like one step away from doing the thing I want to do, but I'm
Hmm.
getting pushed by. And this might be large player counts versus small player counts, like we played. I'm always feeling like that next action is in question because what I wanted to do may not line up with what could like what I need to do to block or whatever is
Hmm.
going on. Um, and so like I'm wondering if like what you found out with Oath, I'm wondering if it's too atomic. I'm wondering if like because you don't have a solid plan of what you're doing on your
Hmm.
turn, you're just taking that action and moving on.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if maybe like Oath there needs to be an ability to select a few actions and
Yeah.
then have the actions be even more atomic.
We like if I zoom out and think about the development of Oath's action system, it was originally
Mhm.
pretty rigid. Like I really liked the original action mechanism of the game, but as the game has gone further on, it's become more of like an action point game where you have 6 action points. You arrange them in a variety of different ways, but like you have to give players something to chunk together. Anyway, and you can keep tension in other ways too, but it has moved hard in the direction towards like almost complete action flexibility. Like on your turn, just do the thing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
can't remember the name. I was playing. Oh, I don't know. I was playing Mark Herman's Waterloo war game, and it had been a while. Like it's a very clever and innovative hex encounter war game, but it had also just been a long time since like all my pieces could move. So since I had played a war game, it was like, oh no, like your pieces have movement values; they could just move.
Right.
And it was like, oh my gosh, the story this game is telling is incredible. And it was just that basic like, imagine each of your piece can take an action. Um, and it's a little more complicated than that. And the game's wonderful if you like hex encounter war games. But it sort of reminded me that a lot of the action constraints are coming from this like very early 2000s Martin Wallace like taking Euro principles and putting them into thematic games that were kind of like still in that moment. And I think you and I both
Sure.
our work is not stuck in that moment, but is still like working with those constraints.
Sure. Sure. I like Ogre.
Yeah, I mean, still
But
Ogre is 40 years old and it's still a good game. It can't be
I
40 years
just
old.
he designed it in 77.
Oh yeah, so it's getting there.
So 33.
Hmm.
No, yeah, no, it's over 40 then, because 1980 was 40 years ago. Woo! He was taking, I read his book. He was taking a class on, and they actually had a seminar on wargame design at the University of Texas, which he took, and then like the professor said something about like you have to choose a scale that is representative of the number of people and the amount of time that they have between turns.
Hmm.
And then Ogre was his attempt to like kind of flip that because it's about nuclear warfare at a in a 4 minute a turn scale.
Hmm.
So it kind of plays with that. Anyway, I digress. Ask me a question.
Ask you a question. Let me give you a question.
Or yourself.
I'm not going to ask myself a question. Ooh, I'm going to ask you a question, and it's a question that like I get to ask you because if I asked myself, I'd look like a jag. Um, so, is there a moment in your recollection? So, this is the way this question is worded: is what's your finest game mechanism or moment as a designer? Any time that you create a solution and you thought like, "Hey, I'm good at this." Is like a specific moment in a design that you're like, "Oh yeah, that thing came together."
It's funny. So I studied psychology and I originally planned to go on and get a PhD in psychology when I was in college. And I'm aware that memory is very much your memory of things is very much shaped by your current emotional state,
Hmm.
and like your ability to recall things will be tainted by your current emotional state. It's just how your brain works, and so like it's funny because I wouldn't say Nick and Cole were like harsh or overcritical, but I just like we just had a pretty deep discussion about
Yeah,
voidage.
we got in the
So I'm
weeds.
like, I'm not a good designer right now. It's my current emotional state. Um, boy, what am I proud of? I really so one thing and this is a little bit like taking from David's work and moving forward. Um, when I was working on Trove to Vast, is that one thing I've always really enjoyed about Vast is I like if you set aside imperialism in D&D, if you just take the story of the dungeon or like the character in Doom being in the dungeon, the dungeon being whatever complex you're running through and shooting monsters in. And for me, that dungeon story is actually a metaphor for self-reliance and not for imperialism, which I guess self-reliance and imperialism are probably bound up somehow. Look, I don't think about metaphor too much. I totally do. And so I like the dungeon story because it is about the pursuit of figuring out where the limit of your bravery and your strength and like the limits of the challenge you can handle if the game is supporting that mechanism correctly. And so for me, I really like the story. I really like dungeon crawls and I like stories about dungeons and Dungeons and Dragons. My campaigns focuses on in the later years of my life, my campaigns have very much focused on telling a good story with the dungeon crawl, not just having the we run into a room and loot stuff, but like actually having quests and actually having sympathetic characters in the dungeon. And what I like about Vast is that I've always been proud of is that the geography of the game and the way the tiles come out and the way that the cave can kind of control it but kind of can't because he or she is kind of forced to play tiles at times, or it's forced to play tiles at times. And the I've never looked at a cave and been like, and I have a really good memory, and when I was playtesting I saw many caves and I never felt like I was playing in the same cave twice. And of course there's so many variables right in that
Hmm.
design that it could not be the same. I mean, it would be very unlikely to be the same. So I've always
Hmm.
liked that about Vast is that the map you're creating really very powerfully shapes the way the game turns out, and it's always been different and kind of always works. So
Hmm.
that's what I'm proud of. Is
That's
that
a good.
is
No,
that good?
that's a great answer because I do think that most underrated mechanism or element of a vast game is the tile composition. Like, no, I don't think I've ever
Sure.
read a review that like really talks about it, and it's so important. And you've also
It's
like,
a and we've done a lot of tweaking with it, right?
mhm.
We did a lot of.
We
There's
did
too
it.
many straightaways. There's not
Yeah,
enough straightaways. There's yeah, that sort of stuff.
but
Yep.
by the time you got to TMM, I mean, one of the amazing things about TMM is like when you moved that design to the development team. There were many things that I went through the fire that all games go through in development. So things change, they get rearranged,
Mhm.
whatever. One thing that didn't really change though was the tile set, which is it was a riff on the TCC tile set, but like the strength of it was so remarkable that like I think we changed like one tile, or I mean, it was like it was just very strong, and it was producing a different kind of geography than TCC,
Mhm.
in part because the house has walls, but also just like there are a couple differences in the tiles, but like the number of different houses that can exist in TMM or caves that really feel different
Mhm.
is really high. Whereas like with TI, and I love TI, and I'm only saying this because I know there are TI people in the thread. TI galaxies kind of feel samey to me. I think there are ways that they don't, but it's like it's the faction mix. To me, the faction mix and the seating order is what determines a TI game. The map is like weirdly
Mhm.
secondary, but I'm also a bad TI player, so maybe that is why.
Yeah, maybe you are a bad TI
Well, it's
player.
just like the way the map gets built in TI generates kind of samier maps. You know.
So I mean, this is something good to write down then, because I think in the map I have in Voidlich by necessity is simple right now, right? Like
Hmm.
we cannot start talking about flow. We can't talk about making a more interesting map until the flow is interesting, and then we can start talking about a more interesting map, I think. And but maybe there is something to be said about paying attention to making sure that the map is as informative as fast and not another TI, right? Like that the map actually will impact the story that is coming unfolding from the game
Hmm.
itself. So, and if you want to see a great example of how the map informs the game, that last game we played on stream, I thought for me as the house, I was pushing against that map the entire game,
Hmm.
like because
Yeah.
where those three straightaways ended up just bogged me down so much, and then you guys kept well, because it was natural for you guys to play around them because you didn't want to be stuck in them either. And so
Hmm.
then it created these huge dead spaces for me during the game. And it was very interesting and frustrating for me. And I
Well,
like, I
and
mean, walking away from the game, it was very satisfying.
with TMM, Nick and I noticed when we were doing some of the development work that like a if the paladin is the main actor revealing tiles, it is usually better for the manner because he's going in these like intelligible paths. Whereas if the
Mhm.
spider is revealing them, the spider can make pockets. And so
Right.
like you have
And
these
the
like
Shadow Paladin's even going to be doing it.
yeah, it's even be worse.
Yeah. And so for the map, it's interesting that it's interesting that that happened because my process for making that map was I made a two-level building. I don't know if you saw this draft.
Hmm.
You probably never did. And then
I've
and
heard
they
you talk
and
about it. Go ahead.
yeah, and it was awful. It probably would have been fine if it had tiles like the terrain tiles from TCC, where there was big ballrooms and
Hmm.
things like that to kind of give the illusion of space, but kind of cover up the like the big this
Hmm.
the how big two floors truly was. Um, and then, but I took all those tiles and merged them into my prototype and said, this now needs to be a one level thing. Excuse me. And then it was just naturally what I like as I pulled tiles out. That's naturally what we got back down to was the current set. So good question.
Hmm.
Same for you. What
Um,
mechanic is
so
are you most proud of?
I had a moment in Root. When we were working on Root, this would have been like November. No, it might have been October. I think this was like late October. Um, where like I had a version of the Erie that like wasn't working at all, and at this point, like the engine of the game had been built. The movement rules were largely. I mean, the movement rules for Root I think were like day one, and then they've more or less stayed the same. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and with the Erie, I had this version of the Erie that was an adaptation of the collapse cycle in Origins, in Eklund's Origins, which I really liked, but just didn't work. And so it was clear that it needed scrapped. And I had a friend who was visiting me, and he was like, "Hey, I want to see like what game design is like." And I'm like, "Okay, you can come to work with me. Today's job is to like rebuild the Erie." And over the course of about like 3 hours, I built the decree system, and then we tested it, and it kind of never changed. And that was like the first time during Root that I was like, oh, all right, sometimes things line up, and it worked out really well. I mean, Roots. I feel like this has been true of a lot of projects I've worked on. Like some projects, you get like a moment. Like with Root, there were a bunch of them where it was like we built the system and then it worked completely fine. And then with other parts of the design, it took 50 iterations, just like constantly going back and revisiting and tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. And I think when it works best, it's hard to tell when you're playing a game the factions that crystallized immediately from those that took a lot of work. That's usually a good sign. I
Mhm.
think it's mostly true of Root. That for instance, like the Corvids, which Patrick did the original design on and Nick did a ton of development work on, went through many iterations, and I think they are very elegant and clean, and they're very uniform when compared to the Duchy, which had like probably a fifth or a tenth of the number of development passes that the Corvids had. When you look at both of them, you're
Mhm.
like these both of these factions are very good, and so you like there's an evening process. And one of the things I really like about Root is the factions to me feel very evenly weighted, just in terms of like the development work that went into them, despite having doing or requiring hugely different amounts of work.
I wonder. There's that thing like when you're. Sorry, I should have taken some Sudafed before I sat down. It is the worst allergy season for me. So I think like it's like that like some dough you don't want to like touch too much,
Hmm.
or grand hamburger you just want to make the patty and put it on. And like you don't want to keep working it, otherwise it's going to lose a lot of a lot of it versus some things you do want to work over and over. So I wonder if there's like a way to tell, but I suppose there isn't. It's just playing
Hmm.
that informs that stuff. So
Well, I always like I
um,
feel like when I'm playing games, I will sometimes say that they feel like
mm,
overdeveloped, and so that's like when I'm
right.
working on a game, it's something I'm super conscious of. Like I being overdeveloped, it means something very specific that I would have a hard time enunciating, but like it means something very specific. And so when I do find myself like on iteration 10 or 20 of something, I'm like, ooh, am I overcooking this? Does it need to, would it be better if I just started over? So I don't know, something to keep my mind on.
That'll be that'll be cool on masterclass in 10 years.
Yep.
I'll be teaching you the final secret is when to tell you're
Yeah.
overdeveloping
The
something.
sous vide
So
method of game design. Fast question. Favorite hot sauce? My answer is
um,
Yellowbird habanero. It's the best.
I've been slumming it. I've been using Frank's Red Hot
Frank's is
lately.
great.
So
This is like
Frank's is good.
Pace. So Pace salsa. I know what we're talking about. This salsa, not hot sauce. Pace's hot salsa is is really good. Like I would like you can compare it to much more expensive salsas, and it's pretty solid. Um, and so I don't
I
know.
use it
There's
a
nothing wrong
lot.
with Frank's. Nothing wrong with Frank's.
I use it a lot during allergy season because it helps. All right, let's look for a deeper one.
Let's go deeper than hot sauce. Um, so this is I don't know where this question's going. Oh, how do we play our games online? Should we just talk about like quarantine and gameplay a little bit and our game playing habits? I can
Sure.
say a few things about that.
Yeah, go right ahead. I've been leading a lot.
So I how do I play my games online? So I feel like TTS for me. I think this is probably true for you too, Patrick. It is work. Like I like boot it up the same way I boot up like Illustrator in the morning. Like TTS is like I might as well be clocking into it. Um, I
Right.
I don't like it. It does. I like that it enables me to work, but it is just so far away. And I actually so two things. I like it enables me to work. I also like the
Mhm.
fact that it allows me to play games with people I wouldn't normally be able to play games with, which is like kind of maybe a dumb
Sure.
thing to say, but it like when I was working on PAX, Drew and I played a lot of games on TTS. It was wonderful to like have him in the house, and I cannot overstate this. I love my oath testers. I haven't really been able to play very many games with them, but they play great games together, and I like want to be like their friends. Like they're very cool people, and I love the fact that they've been able to get together over the game. But when I like almost all of my online game playing is real time strategy games, things that don't involve TTS at all. Um, my two quarantine hits so far that I've been doing. One of them is I'll give a board game and a video game. So video game, I've got back deep into StarCraft. It grabbed me again, and my brother and I are climbing the ladder. We're in platinum now. We're gonna be diamond before the end of the season. I swear it. And we've been having a great time. It's been so fun to play a game that demanding, and it's just so clever. It's just such a clever, interesting, good game, and it's free now. So go play StarCraft 2 if you're bored with life. Play StarCraft. And then also, I've been really enjoying a friend of mine, Toby Mao, Captain Tobes, I think is his user name, made a really brilliant HTML5 18xx engine that plays 1889. You can play it at 18xx.games, and it plays in real time, and it's beautiful, and it's better than almost any board game, digital implementation of a board game I've ever seen, and it's just like a free way to play 18xx. So I've done that a couple times, and it's been wonderful because 1889 is a great game, and when it's quasi automated, like you can knock it out in like an hour or two. So that's been my online gaming.
So this is it's interesting. We have what is our baby? 2 months younger than yours?
Yeah, something like that. Nell's like
2 or 3 months?
September 1st, late August.
Yeah, so about yeah. Um so we're kind of in the thick of it as far as that goes, right? Like we're not sleeping well. I don't know if you guys have returned to a normal sleep schedule yet, but so like we're still like dealing with that, and then so it's been hard for me to get away. Like it's either like I'm here designing at this table, or I'm spending time with family. So my gaming's been a little bit reduced. When once we went into the quarantine, like I play D&D every week, and I've worked very hard to maintain that like the circle of people that will play D&D with me every week. This is a challenge as you get older, and we've been doing that. We alternate between two different campaigns. A friend of mine runs a homebrew system also, and that game is impossible to run online because we have no resources for it. Like we would have to create all the assets for that, and it's very tactical. Like it needs a map, it needs miniatures, it needs
Hmm.
like I could probably move it to TTS now that I know how. But there's like 50 cards per character in that game, and so there's a lot of work there. So, but we were playing D&D, and we had just started a D&D campaign from one of the books that they sell, and I was bitter the first 6 weeks. We kept trying to game online. It was a challenge for one of my people to get online and play well because of slow internet and slow computer, and so I would get done and I'd just be like, I don't want to game anymore. Like if this is
Hmm.
what gaming is going to be, I'm just like, for me it wasn't as fun as just hanging out with my friends on Saturday night, eating and playing a game together as a social event. And we just finally got into Roll20, and we've had 2 sessions under Roll20, and I'm not excited about Roll20's interface
Yeah.
still, and so like I go into the game with like really hopeful, and then like last week I just was like, I'm fighting the map, I'm fighting where the characters are. I feel like I don't feel like role playing's harder in that environment because I don't feel the connection
Hmm.
with the other people at the table. I can't read their faces. I don't know if they understand what I'm saying or if they don't understand what I'm saying, and so I was just very frustrated by the end of the game. I also I had read the module completely like 2 months before COVID, or a month before COVID, and running it was fine. But then
Hmm.
with that break, with that 6 week break, I came back to it and I was looking at the material and I was like, I normally my memory is really sharp, and with baby brain plus that break, I was like, I don't even know what's coming up next in this story right now, so I couldn't tell
Hmm.
you. So I was a little frustrated with that. But TTS, I just budget 50% more time to play a game because I know it's going to be
Hmm.
frustrating to move the pieces around. I myself have learned how to move stuff into TTS. So I built Castle Blood, which is another game I'm working on right now, completely from scratch in TTS. And I did 2 dexterity games recently, and so I'm making peace with it, but I'm still not a fan of the platform.
Hmm.
And I complained about it a little bit yesterday on Twitter. I was an angry old man yesterday on Twitter, but I talked about how insulting I think the table flip button is because you wouldn't go to a museum where you could slash paintings, like, and so why are you telling me that my art, and I'm not some high and mighty like artist, but like, you're telling to me that my pieces should be on the floor, or the game state isn't serious enough to treat with any respect beyond you can push this button and flip the table over at any moment, and that it just kind of annoys me. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but so I'm making my piece of TTS, and as far as being able to keep our jobs going, that's pretty good. I feel like I can prototype a bit faster in real life still,
Yeah.
and I'm even leaning on someone else's labor to get stuff into TTS, and I think prototyping, with Void Lich, one of the things I had to reload last night was the assassin scheme changed because it was too weak in the iteration we played on Friday, and so I reloaded it for Monday. And so I was like, well, while I'm doing this, I'm going to review the card list. And I reviewed the card list, and I thought, man, I'm basically going to have to send this to someone else to load into TTS because I wanted to change the text on one card. And if it had been a real prototype, I would just grab the card and scratched
Mm-hmm.
out all the bad writing and put the correct writing on it. So yeah,
Yeah.
probably a longer answer than you wanted, but
No, no. I think that like TTS gripes are real. I think it's like it's a thing we've had to kind of make peace with. I also think it's funny. Um, if I'm playing with people who are a little distractible, heck, I'm distractible when I play TTS. It just adds so much
mhm.
time, and it's like not even. I can't even blame the format. It's just, or I can't blame the program. I'm like, it's the format's problem. Like I'm just, oh yeah, I'll look on Twitter, and then I've wasted five
Yeah, then
minutes
yeah, then you're
'cause I
yeah,
didn't realize
and
it was
then
my
sure,
turn or anything like that. We've actually one thing that's been nice about the oath tests is that turns are snappy enough that like you kind of can't
yeah,
like you just can't look away. I do feel like I'm glad that oath really got lucky. Like I don't want to I don't want to demean the quarantine, but oath got very lucky because of where it was in the development process when the quarantine happened, because it has allowed us to move like a part of the process that's just not that affected by playing it on TTS, and so it doesn't. I don't feel like it's hurt.
yeah.
I think honestly, if anything, the way that we had to change testing has been better for this stage of development. But I still
I,
am excited to
I
play
think we
things.
will learn. Yeah, I think we will learn some things. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh yeah. Totally.
Yeah,
Okay.
I I I'll just tag on. I think we'll learn some things. And a lot of people have asked us if the virus is going to make anything late, and I kept looking at them blankly, like, what, why? And then I'm starting to see some late notices from other people, but really, we were quite fortunate about when it hit that, like, you were at the stage where you could test. Fort was already
Right.
at the printer, so it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
So
We kind
yeah.
of, and I think that
Anyway, go ahead.
like it has adjusted Oath's schedule a little bit, but not in dramatic ways at all. I think it. Yeah, it's adjusted the schedule a little bit, but not more than a schedule might be adjusted for any number of reasons.
Mm-mm.
People want the big box
All
for
right.
root. I'm just reviewing the questions.
Oh, sure.
Um,
There's not going to be a big box. I'm sorry. I mean,
of course, there'll be a box
I'll take that
eventually.
back. There'll be eventually be a bigger box, but let us finish the game and stop asking for a bigger box, please.
Ooh, I have a question I want to ask you, Patrick. It's a very small question. Have you ever played the PC game Acheron?
Oh, I didn't talk about what games I was playing
Oh yeah.
back when you told me that you're playing StarCraft. That's okay though. I'm
Oh.
not playing anything multiplayer, so that's probably, so whatever. Uh
But do you?
Archon, the
Yeah,
the
I think it's called
the
Archon,
chess.
but someone spelled it slightly differently. Yeah, this sort of Titan.
Yeah, I've played a lot of Archon.
Yeah,
That'd be cool. Should we do like a Archon, like that'll be our next, we'll collaborate
yeah.
and we'll do an Archon style game.
But the problem is it's Titan, right? It's like we're in like a recursive game development loop. Because isn't it like
There was
I always thought that game was just an adaptation of Titan. That like I know it's different, but
there was a game on the PlayStation 1 that was from the same, it had the same bones of the development team, from Archon, and but it was 3D because it was on PlayStation, and it
Hmm.
was a hex map, and there was two sides, and the sides were very asymmetric. One was like represent technology, and had this lineup of 7 characters. Oh no, I'm sorry, Star Control. Star Control also has its bones in Archon,
Hmm.
and it was the same development team as Star Control. So they had 7 fighters on each side, and you'd move around this hex map and developing resources on it. And then when they touched each other, they would go into a battle, like an arcade style, like
Ooh,
one-on-one
nice.
battle in a 3D arena. And it was astounding how well developed the like this character is good against precisely these 2 characters and he is terrible against these 2 characters, and that shaped a lot of the strategic like development of the game
Hmm.
versus the tactical development of the game. And I can't remember the name of the game. I'll look it up and tell you later. But it was great. You should track it down sometime because like I said, the balance was so astounding.
Hmm.
Anyway, go ahead.
No, no, that
But yeah,
was
I played Archon. What
yeah. No,
follow-up question
I
to
don't
that?
know. There even was a follow up question to that. I saw that. My friends was like, okay, I will definitely talk about that game. Um,
No, it's pretty cool. We probably burned out somebody's Commodore 64 when I
mhm.
was a kid,
I didn't
just playing Archon
realize it
over and
was the
over.
same team that did Star Control, which is one of my favorite games.
I no, I think I the game I was talking about on the PlayStation was the same team as Star
Oh,
Control. I
okay,
don't
I
think
got you.
Archon and Star Control. I didn't. Yeah, I'm disconnecting those
I mean,
two. But we can research it. Maybe we'll find out
we can
something.
find out there are things, there are connections. I'm just kind of perusing through the list.
PlayStation era, Untold. I feel like this.
Uh, do, 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 do. Let me go to
Where's my mouse?
the question bank and see if there's any that
Okay.
I'm hunting.
Yeah, and if
The
we missed your question because we reset or something like that,
Yeah, I'm
by
sorry.
all means, yeah, put
Um,
it back in the window.
yeah, we'll get it.
You know, I don't even know if people are
Yeah,
even
there have
watching.
been a few people in the thread have asked about root expansions. And I'll just echo what Gates is saying, which is like we're working on some. We've got some stuff coming. It's like right now we are in a very my bandwidth is just entirely Oath, and Patrick is working on Void Lich, and we're all like busy finishing these projects. But after they're done, we'll go on to the next thing. One thing I actually love about the method at Leader and kind of how we think about our schedule, it's very different from most game companies in lots of ways. And usually I like highlight like the collaborative stuff and the kind of studio structure of the company. But one of the other big differences is that if you go to, I won't name names, but like just the vast majority of game companies, they have a big schedule. They have a lot of projects happening at the same time. And that is just like
Hmm.
and that's a little true for us, but like if you're on a team for one project, you are probably going to have a primary project and maybe like a very low key secondary project. And so, like, the Oath development team right now, which is myself and Josh and Nick, primarily, Nick has a little side project he's working on. Josh is just living in Oathland, and I'm just living in Oathland. And so, like, one of the great privileges of the way we have things set up is that, like, I don't have to think about root right now. That's the whole point. So I'm sorry if I don't have more
It's for
specific questions.
it's very lonely for me. I'm working on Void Lich by myself. No,
Yeah.
it's fine. It's been an interesting transition for me because I have been very hands-on with every aspect of the company until now,
Hmm.
and that has grown to the point where I cannot be directly hands-on with every part of the company right now. Like it is not possible for me to be committed to a solid and good design rhetoric rubric. I don't know what you want
Hmm.
to say there, and still be managing shipping a package in France. Like
Right.
that's so it's good for me to back off, but that has created like there's an ego to being able to be involved in all those things
Sure.
that I am untraining for myself right now, and it's
Hmm.
been hard. It's been
Yeah.
really hard on me, and it's a hard and it's lonely because I have there's not many people I can talk to about it. My wife does not understand the problem anymore, and that's fine. I don't expect her to. And so it's been an interesting transition. And so then now I'm like back to where I was with Vast, where I sit in a room all day and I work and literally at home again, as it turns out.
Hmm.
And I've been working on this. Of course, I'm not alone at home right now, but and I've been drilling down into this very specific design. And I felt guilty at first because at first I was like, oh my God, Cole is just he's working on Oath by himself, which he wants to do, but for some reason I still feel guilty
Sure.
about it's crazy how the brain works, right? And so last week was kind of the watershed moment where, and I think Kyle and I were talking about it, or someone from outside the student and I were talking about it. And like, no, this is what they're depending on you to do, and you need to go off and design this game and come back to them and bring with you something that they can, that we can then sell in the future. So
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 like,
it's just been an interesting transition for me.
and one like interesting consequence of that is, when you handed off TMM and when you handed off Root Underworld to development, there was no world where you could have managed the development of those games because you were stacked with other company with building out the company. Void
Yeah,
Lich, I
and
think,
getting
is
benefits.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, all yeah, yes, totally. Void Lich to me is the first project since I started where if in a couple months when we get it to the point where we're going to green light or schedule it or figure out what we're going to do with the title, if you wanted to say like, hey, I want to be the develop lead on this and give me a junior developer, it's the first time where like
Mhm.
that's actually been a thing that can happen. Which maybe you want to do it, maybe you don't. We don't have to answer that question, but like the fact that it's even possible shows how much things have kind of shifted and how much you've been able to kind
Yes,
of
I
like
agree.
create space for you to do what you want, where you want to do.
As an aside, if I may,
Hmm.
Paul Ritchie III worked on Mail Order Monsters, which is a fantastic formative game for me from the Commodore era,
Hmm.
and Archon, which is also a fantastic game for me from the era. And then he went and worked on another. He joined another studio and eventually worked on Star Control. So they do have their. They do
That's
have
a
their.
hot call to track that. I love it. That's very good.
Yes. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I can you can kind of see it. Like
Yeah.
when you made that, or when I misinterpreted your comment or whatever, I was like, oh no, that the Archon folks, Star Control folks. This makes sense that there's some overlap.
Makes total sense, yeah. And Mail Order Monsters was the same sort of had tactical and strategic movement that was arcade. It wasn't
Hmm.
turn based, and then eventually you'd get into a fight. I also found a Toys for Bob, which made a very awesome 10-minute adventure game. And I'm forgetting the name of it. It was this cute little adventure game that you'd be like you would start out from planet Earth and you would fly around the universe and come back and get points
Hmm.
for whatever you brought back, and it was great. So
Do you
all
want?
right, anyway, sorry.
So we should kind of round things up. There are a few oath questions that I can hit, um, but I want to not forget a question from earlier. If you want to answer another one right now, which is Kyle asked. So you were talking about solo games in our quarantine lives and their renewed importance in the market and in our own headspace. Kyle wanted to know about family games and how you think about like it. Do you want to do a family game? Is it something that you feel like the company's equipped to do? Do you think we're going to see more family games in this next period, in the after
Is this
times?
Kyle Farron?
This is that Kyle, our
Oh my
beloved
god.
Kyle.
Is he watching?
I mean, he might be.
Okay. All right. Yeah, anyway. So I mean, I have a drafts and starts of a lot of little family games. My family games are challenging, right? Because I feel like you and I are novelists
Hmm.
and we're trying, like telling me to write in a different genre would like if you were a detective novelist, unless you were Philip Dick, I wouldn't expect you to write in a different genre.
Hmm.
That's a tough transition. And so like that, like I have a lot of starts, and then I realize that what I could play with my daughter who's 6, so still pretty limited vocabulary as far as what games she can play. Versus I wouldn't teach her Vast tomorrow. Like that just
Hmm.
isn't going to happen, right? Like that's I mean maybe she could play one character really well if she just happened to be have an aptitude for it. And so for me to like to switch gears, like every time I've set out to design a family game, I end up with something that is like I'm like, oh, this is the right amount of complexity, and then I try playing it with her, and I'm like, oh, this is
Hmm.
too much for her again. And or if I play it with a kid, it's too much for her again. And so I'm that is a big blind spot for me. If you found the right developer, I would love to make a few family games. I think that'd be great. I have no problem with that. I think we could do. I think there's even space for an asymmetric family game. I
Mm-hmm.
think you'd have to have a very limited set of actions
Mm-hmm.
that you take in that game. But I think there's even space for that. And I even have pitches for like if there was a developer popped up and said, and I said, "Yep, that's the guy, that's the woman. I'm going to hire that person, and I'm going to have a developer for family games." I even have. Well, I guess we need a designer. I have pitches for games I would like to put into that track. Do we have that resource? No, we don't, and
Mm-hmm.
we don't have the resource for it right now. So that's my response.
Yeah, no,
What do you think?
I think so. Well, I don't know. I feel so weird about family games because if I think about so I'm such a selfish designer because I really am like designing stuff that I want to play or that I would want to play at a different point in my life. So I can't do that
Yeah,
trick that like I think Knizia or like Eric Lang or a bunch of other amazing designers can do, where they like can look at a market and can design for that market that they might not be part of. That to me is crazy. I can't imagine being able to do that. And so when I think about family games, I'm like, okay, so we play a lot of games in my household, but it's mostly like chess and checkers. Like my son is 6. We play chess a lot. We play checkers sometimes. We've played a few board games. Like I kind of taught him Talismanish. He's like just starting to read, but mostly like I give him Vast or something like that, and he sets up the tiles and draws maps and just like plays around with Vast. And when I think about my own, like, that isn't so different from how I played when I was a kid. Like, Dad taught us chess early. We learned Risk, Stratego, and then about middle school, we got into Catan and started playing board games. And so I have like a hard time with family games from the perspective of like once I want to start really playing games with rules with my kids, and once they're there, like, well, we're just going to play Catan or something of that
sure.
order. So it's like hitting me in this zone where I have a hard time like imagining what a good family game looks like. Right? Because I'm like, a
Mhm.
family game's like Stone Age. But then we're at like actually a lightweight Euro at that point. So I never. I mean, that's true. I don't know, Kyle. Have we ever talked about the podcast Blank Check? I feel like you and I must both listen to this podcast because I've been listening to their George Miller series and they're talking about Happy Feet 2 right now, and it's fantastic. No, I get it. I get it. And I just I don't know. It's like I get what a kids movie is. I would be more. I would feel better about writing a YA novel than about making a kids game. Like I would feel more comfortable writing a children's book, and I realize that's a very difficult thing to do, and I don't mean to trivialize it, but I just feel because I feel like I understand what kids books are. Like my wife and I both lit people, we read a lot of kids lit, and I feel like I have a good understanding of like how they work, and I have no understanding of like how a Hava game works. I couldn't tell a good Hava game from a bad Hava game. I don't think. Um,
I like Alice and I really jammed on Animal Upon Animal, which I think is the most played hobby game we have by a margin. And then we got to the point where we played a perfect game of Animal Upon Animal. Like neither of us ever dropped a piece. And we were like, well, that was dumb because it just came down. Even she was like, that was dumb because it was whoever rolled the most pips, right? That gets
right.
to place the most pieces. So, you know, and so I'm glad she's that self aware. And so it's like, well, I guess we have to go on to something more challenging now,
Hmm.
unfortunately. And that was just a lot of practice. All
Yeah. We
right.
played the one Hava game that we have is the one where you have the weird like bungee thing and you have to build the castle. You know what I'm talking about? Like
Yes.
knights something.
She
Which
really likes that game.
I don't
Yeah, go
like.
ahead.
It isn't really a game. I do like the stacking element. So we'll usually invent hard stacking games, or like we'll just play blocks with the fun little pull thing. So I would
Yeah.
actually, I would love to buy like 4 of those. Just the little pull things. Because I think I could apply them to other things. And they're all beautiful productions. And I
It's,
get someone actually, can I fold a question in here because it relates?
yeah, go right ahead.
Somebody earlier said like how important is physical feel and like texture and the material to games when we're thinking about them. And I think that is the part of like kids games that I am most into because I am obsessed with physical production. I like to spend a lot of time thinking about the different materials that we're using. And I think that like the thing that board games are really good at is that they are like physical objects that will last a really long time. Like someone is going to find a copy of a game that you worked on, Patrick. long after you're dead. And it's like the weird material element of the stuff you work on echoes just much longer than a human is going to live. And so to me, like paying attention to like how it is presented and how it deals with like the touch of a piece. That's why I like working in wood so much. And I've done things with cloth and resin. I think materials are very, very, very important. And so that element of family games is really interesting to me because in general I think
Is
family games are better at it than other game forms.
it is Hava's bread and butter, right?
Yeah.
It's the presentation, it's the toy factor, it's the wow when you walk up to the booth. I walk up to their booth 2 conventions a year, and I just like Bobby, put it down in front of me. I think Bobby's the fellow that works there, and then he just grabs a bunch of stuff and hands it to me, and then I buy it, and I take them home, and I love the presentation. And they got a good curb appeal. Because that what's the question? I'm spacing out here.
Oh, no, this is about
So
the different game materials. And while you answer it, I'm gonna go
yeah,
do some show and tell. I gotta grab something. I'll be right back.
okay. So what's funny about the game lasting beyond my death is at the rate I'm eating snacks because of the work from home. That'll probably be next week, frankly. Then someone will find my because I'm just eating snacks so quickly. All right, show
Okay,
and
show and
tell.
tell. This is in terms of games with physical feel. This is one of the weirdest games I own. It is called Spring on a String, and it the Jeff Borer, the guy who owns Funnigan. We have a standing agreement where like he always comes back from Essen, and I go up and Jeff and I are friends. We've known each other for a while, and I'll always ask him like, what's the thing? Give me one. I'll buy anything. I just want one game from you that you think is really special. I don't want to know anything about it. And he would give me like, oh, this weird euro is actually like it looks like a normal euro, but it's not. He always gives me great recommendations. Anyway, this year he gave me Spring on a String. And the way this game works, I'll just show people. This is very little bit of show and tell. This is the board, and these are your player pieces. And you have these like funny rules, like if you exit a pink, you like your next jump has to be to this color, and you're just trying to see how many jumps you can get to. But the rules are so asymmetric and like tricky, where like you have to cross 3 lines, like after you're this jump, and it actually becomes like a bit of a brain burner. But it scales really cleanly from like rules that would be a nice simple logic puzzle for kids to something that is actually like quite competitive and interesting. And it's just one of those like sewing puzzles that might be in a toy kit or something. Great, it's a great game.
I
Spring
like
on a
I
String.
like that. I like that. One of the Spiel nominees this year looks really interesting to me too for introducing to Alice because she likes the verbal and she likes the artistic component. And
Hmm.
there's that game. Is it Pictures? Is that what it's
Yeah,
called?
yeah, yeah, pictures.
Yeah, yeah. I think I was like, why didn't it? Like, someone offered me a copy somewhere, and I was like, well, I got a luggage constraints, and now I'm like, I am dumb. I should have picked that up and brought it home to play with them. Um,
I've
yeah,
been
and so
Yeah,
that's I
go ahead.
guess that's a long way to say no family game right now.
Yeah, and I've been really interested, Kyle, in like listening to your conversation on Twitter about finding a good RPG rule set for kids because I like Owen is now old enough. Like he actually gave me the other day. So it's funny. I try really hard not to indoctrinate my kid. Of course, I'm indoctrinating my kid. You can't avoid it. But like, I really try. Like, yeah, Dad, he designs games. I don't talk about my work with them. I don't want them to like go to their teacher and be like, I want to be a game designer when I grow up. I want them to find out whatever they want to do. Um, but I guess I can't avoid it because Owen presented me the other day with a like essentially a choose your own adventure D&D game with like a very Final Fantasy combat where like he flips the page and it's like, here's you and here's a troll and there are these little inventory bubbles over you and he's like, all right, what weapon are you going to use on the troll? And I was like, I don't know, I guess that sword. And he's like, okay, you slash the troll and the troll like sets you on fire. And like he has never watched us play Final Fantasy. I don't know where this is coming from, but I'm now like, okay, it's time for D&D. And I think we're going to do a kind of pictorial D&D with minimal writing and probably no rules. But he's like at the right. He's ready for like shared storytelling, and I don't know if I just don't know if I feel like I need a rule set because we're just gonna end up making up most of the rules anyway.
I think, yeah, I think that's how we're gonna approach it. And Alice doesn't want the her stories tend to focus on avoidance or friendship and
Hmm.
more than violence. And so if we do role play, I was like, oh, maybe I should teach her D&D during the quarantine. And I was like, no, because she's gonna be like, we're gonna be like, I'm gonna like go in the dungeon and then find a kobold, fight the kobold. And she's like, no, I'm gonna make friends with the kobold, which is fine. But then we should just play a
We
game
should,
about
yeah,
making friends
yeah.
with the
Well,
kobold
I
stuff.
did
Yeah.
like the thing I've given my sons right now are they're very into like wrestling and fighting. They're into fighting stuff right now, and
Yeah.
I did lend them the like if you're telling a story, you can say like, hey, you only hit this guy if you roll a number higher than three, like a three or higher. And so they have integrated
Yeah.
just on a D6 that like notion of the skill check. If they're doing like if they're making up a board game, they're going to play with each other. Sometimes I'll see skill checks in it.
Oh,
It's
that's
a
cool.
rule they have, but I haven't really gone any farther than that.
So
Okay,
it's funny. I've been watching one more thing. I've been
yeah,
watching Gorilla Miniatures, which is a group in England. He paints and he plays war games. I'm amazed when I watch him because he knows seven war games very well, which are miniature war, like so Warhammer. If you think about something in the scope of Warhammer 40K, and then he knows another game of that scope and five more. And I started watching because he plays Rangers of the Shadow Deep, which is very interesting to me right now. And so I was like, oh, I kind of want to play a miniature war game. And then I looked at Alice and I was like, maybe I need to come up with a miniatures game that isn't some funky badass guys in the future with machine guns, but like this is so kind of like the scale of Mayor Block, where it's like you are walking around town building things and helping people,
hmm,
and but still do that with miniatures or with Legos or something like that. So
yeah.
maybe you heard it here first. So
Cool. All right. Well, I feel
all
like
right,
we've been at it for a bit. I have a couple of like random oath questions that I can answer quickly. And then if you want to look at the chat, you're welcome to pull. Actually, I have a good final question for you, Patrick, if you'd like one.
all right.
But let me answer the oath
That sounds
questions.
good.
Um, two things. One, someone asked about two-player development allows a player to be the Commonwealth. So a funny thing happened with the development of the bot. This is like very fast-breaking news, like as of like a week ago. The logic that I built to run the Chancellor bot seems like it might also work on an Exile. And so I'm going to test that probably next week and just see if it works. If that does work, then the bot will be able to play either position. If it looks like it's going to be very hard for that to happen, I'm not going to do it because I'd rather work on other parts of the design right now. Would you guys ever do a live development stream? I've thought about it because our card chats are like kind of interesting. I mean, we're just like we go through all these cards, we talk about making them worse, better, all those things. Maybe in a week or so, when we do the next pass on the cards, I could stream it. And I'm sure when you feel comfortable, Patrick, if you'd ever want to stream a voidless chat, we could certainly do that too. Um,
Yeah, I don't think we have time for it, but sort of the fantasy was next game I developed. We talked about this at one point about having a weekly
mhm.
meeting and then just broadcasting that meeting and
Just
torpedoes
kind
be
of.
damned about what the consequences of people seeing. I think you guys are going to be surprised sometimes when you see how the sausage is made, so to speak. Um, but I wouldn't mind that, and I wouldn't mind showing off a game while in development while it's being played.
Mhm.
I am planning on starting a work in progress for Void Lich when I feel that the things that we chatted about today are a little bit baked. Then I'll start a work in progress thread to discuss it on BDG. It's interesting though because for me, at this stage in the game, I'm even pretty choosy about what playtesters I play with because
Mhm.
you are in a very sensitive part of my personality and ego. Like you're very close to the core of my artistic expression. And
Mhm.
I like for me to expose that to the public might I think that might be a bit and I've been pretty open about everything else I've done in my life, but I
Mhm.
think that's like one place I have to draw the curtain. So
With
um
Oath, I've taken like more notes than I've ever taken on the design, and like I have like the designer diaries. I also have this design journal, all these records, and sometimes I go back to the design journal, which I write an entry of every few days, and it's just kind of bruising. Like it's not fun in a way that sometimes design is fun. Um, and so when we show people parts of the process, because there are a lot of vulnerabilities involved, you don't want to compromise the process in the nature of doing something good like being transparent. And so I totally get what you're saying. And it's why we get to be choosy with playtesters and things. Okay, last
Yeah.
question for Patrick. So I've written a bunch about my influences. This is from Corey Small, noting that like I talk about how the PAX game is really important for me. Patrick, talk about one of the biggest board game influences on your work, the secret seed that you feel like informs a lot of your work.
Oh yeah, that's a good. I mean, I could probably write about my influences for a week, right? Like,
Yeah, but
and
do you feel
I do
like
think
is there
about
like
them a lot.
one like weird touchstone?
Definitely. Yeah. So for me, the and I think like my love of the asymmetricness of Vast comes from this person, and I think you know who I'm going to say, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think is it Peter
Yeah, Olaka or something.
Otakla?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know his name. He's actually like tweeted with me on Twitter, and it was like, if you'd have told high school Patrick he would be someday communicating with the person that designed Cosmic Encounter, or part of the design team at Cosmic
Mm-hmm.
Encounter, you'd have been like, no. Um, and for me, so I played hundreds of games of Cosmic Encounter in high school because at the time it was like in the hobby space, there was plenty of hex encounter war games that my friends weren't going to get into, and there's plenty of miniature war games which we were too poor for. And so like we had an ogre and that sort of stuff, it all kind of out of vogue, and so that was hard. It was available, but it was harder to get like the
Mm-hmm.
full set. You know, we played a lot of Car Wars in junior high and early high school, but when we discovered one day I had a bunch of money with me, we were at a games because we had to drive from Owatonna, Minnesota to St. Paul to buy games. And we would make a special trip to the Phoenix on Lake Street and then eventually the Source, which is my game store now. And we'd drive up there, we'd take all this money with us. You know, I worked a part-time job. And then I just saw a Cosmic Encounter there on the shelf. And I was like, this looks cool. And I looked at it and I'm like, how would you guys like to try a board game instead of like having a role play every time we get together? And we bought it, we rushed home, like I think like it was a school night, even like we like somehow I convinced my parents to let me come up on Wednesday because it's an hour drive. And we got home at like 8 or 9. I'd read the rules on the way home and I was like, let's play this. Maybe it was summer, you know, for all I know. I just remember we were up later than we should have been for whatever we were doing the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And we sat down and we played Cosmic Encounter. And then we played it and we played it and we played it and we played it and we kept playing it. And I would say anytime I wasn't working after high school because my dad required me to have a part-time job, I would go over to my friend's house and we would play Cosmic Encounter. Any school night, like we would play it, and I'm sure like my grades suffered for it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, and what I always like about Cosmic and like, and then I discovered the 1,000 power set online that someone at Berkeley had put together when I got to college. And what I've always liked about Cosmic Encounter is like there's some ingenious powers. The central conceit of Cosmic is that it's a very simple game, but everybody has an exception to the rules built in front, like built into them. That's our alien race in the game. And there's some very simple powers. There's like the laser, which blinds your opponent, and so they pick their encounter card randomly. And that has its own threat and its own weight in the game. But there's some powers that are very complicated and deep to play. And I think the mixture of those two of like how do I turn this power into an advantage in this game with the set of powers that I've been presented facing that I'm facing against is a very interesting question to me, and it's followed me through my design quite a bit. I think you would see that in my design. There's a lot of randomness in the game, and I think if I had designed it now, I think there would be some things that would be a little bit different in how the encounters shape up because I think I would emphasize the alliances more than it did, and probably would have suffered for it. I think it is actually good how swinging the combat can be.
Mm-hmm.
But and I think Fantasy Flight's done a good job carrying that torch.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I could suddenly magically get Cosmic Encounter away from them and continue, I probably wouldn't change much of the design path. There's some of the variants that they put in are a little um, it gets a little focused on them, but the powers that they've designed for the game, I think, have
Mm-hmm.
been very really interesting and feel very natural, very big part of the game. The last expansion they did with Peter and his son and the other part of the design team, I can't remember the fellow's name, um, is really cool. The powers they went off the rails intentionally, and it's a pretty fun little thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would say Cosmic Encounter is my biggest is my biggest go-to for inspiration.
That is a great
What's
answer.
yours?
Oh, I don't know. I like they're like I like divide it into these like two little periods. One of them is Container and then the PAX, like so Container in 2007, huge, like is the reason the Otters look the way they are. Lots of other things, super important design, and then like of course the PAX games, like I just didn't realize games could do that thematically.